But I want to dive a little deeper into this whole issue because Diane and I were saved during the Jesus movement. And obviously we just had the Jesus Revolution film come out, and that was awesome. And it sort of depicts that time. And during that time, I think all the evangelicals were sort of wringing their hands saying, what are we going to do about this young generation, you know? And the young generation was in rebellion. It was, you know, the free speech movement, the Vietnam War protests, all of the political dynamics that were going on. There was polarity, there was race riots, you know, there was the assassination of Bobby Kennedy and Martin Luther King. I mean, it was a turbulent, difficult time where everybody was saying, wow, Jesus must be coming back tomorrow because, you know, there's no way we could see this generation coming back. And then the Holy Spirit began to move. And that's kind of what you're forecasting, is that we could be on the verge of something very similar. You know, if you look at the dynamics of that generation, and then they even had a pandemic, the Hong Kong flu. So you look at that generation, and then you look at our generation, and there's something very similar that could cause us to wring our hands, cause us to lose hope. But on the other hand, you're saying there is hope. So what do you see in the topography, the landscape of culture right now that gives you hope for a new, fresh outpouring, a new season of harvest?
Yeah, well, I mean, you hit on a couple of things that I'm constantly trying to remind myself and leaders of, and that's this reality. We are actually not somewhere new. And I think that's the mindset. It's often like, oh my gosh, like this is the worst it's ever been. And I'm like, no, actually not. And it's an over-sexualized culture. Have you read the history books about Rome? Like this actually isn't new. We have been here before, and historically God always has a response to when we think, and usually that is when his response comes, when we go, oh my gosh, he's going to have to rapture us all because there's no way he can clean up this mess. He's like, watch me do it. And then usually watch me do it with the ones you think I can't use. Like he comes in and he uses the least likely. That was the story of the Jesus People movement. We can go through, every major generation has experienced revival. And so I think we need to understand, first off, this is not a hopeless situation to the Lord. It may feel hopeless, but it is not hopeless. This is not the most vile, profane, even though we are experiencing what is vile and profane, and we very much need to draw a line in the sand. It is not the most vile generation there's ever been. No, we have experienced these things before. And so I think we're seeing this landscape where there's massive polarization, right? And we see that, right? The dark is getting darker and the light is getting brighter. And that's very real. We have very significant issues in culture that we need to be dealing with. Sometimes I hesitate to share my opinions because they're not always, it's an opinion. But I think the sexualization issue in culture is probably one of the predominant ones we need to be attacking right now. I've been reading statistics consistently about just the issues of transgenderism and homosexuality and it is alarming, not to me what culture says about these issues, it's alarming to me what the church says about these issues. So I expect, when I was 17, my youth pastor said this to me, and I've never forgotten: lost people act like lost people. The problem is when people who say they're Christians act like lost people, right? So I am actually not shocked by targeting young children. That is not shocking to me. What would you expect, in this culture? What I'm shocked about is when the church is so afraid to stand up for truth. And I know we're going to get into this later, so I'm jumping a little bit ahead, but we have this misconception that there's a generation that doesn't want to hear the truth. And I would actually say that's a misconception. That is not the truth. We were just on a call with Leila Pais, did a call for me last week. She was my pastor's wife in Brazil, and phenomenal. She has a degree in mental health and counseling. And she shared that one of the most dangerous things affecting this generation, she believes, is the idea that there is such thing as a my truth. And her reasoning for that is not just because it's dangerous to think that there's your truth, but that is actually producing insecurity in a generation. Because here's the church going, sure, you can have your truth. And so now they are looking around going, wow, nobody tells me there's a real truth. I get to create my own if I want. I
Wow.
get to look for it here. I get to look for it there. I can look for it anywhere. And what we've tried to do to try and make people more comfortable is kind of shied away from saying, no, this is actual truth. And it's actually producing insecurity in the culture. What the culture needs is a church that stands up and actually says, no, no, there is a truth. And you may not like it, but it is the truth. And
Wow.
I think we would be shocked. I am seeing this with the young people I work with, both those that are on varying levels of commitment to Jesus, right? From those who have no desire to know him to those who are sold out believers. They are looking for someone to say, no, there actually is a truth.
Wow.
You can feel secure in this. You may not like what it says about your life. You may not like how it forces you to change. You may not like what it says about you, but the reality is there is a truth, and I can't back away from that, right? So I'm getting way off topic to say this. Barna just put out a study that the title is "Openness to Jesus Isn't the Problem, the Church Is." And
Wow.
this just came out in May 17th. You can go look it up. And basically, it was saying this: the majority of society, when polled, both Christians and non-Christians, have no problem having a positive response to who Jesus is. But
Mhm.
both Christians and non-Christians have a alarming negative emotion towards the church.
Wow.
And so I think when we're looking at the landscape of culture, there is a growing, and there's another Barna study that actually says there, and I can't, this one came out a few months ago, so Michael, you probably already read it, but basically there is a growing spiritual hunger in America.
Yeah.
So that we know there is a growing hunger for the things of the supernatural. We can see that just in the rise of witchcraft, things like that. There is a growing hunger for truth, for right and wrong, for a morality code to go by. And yet, at the same time, as that grows, the feeling towards the church is becoming worse and worse. And so I think as leaders in the church, when we're talking about the next generation, these are the questions we need to start asking. What is happening in a culture that is causing them to go, Jesus I like, but the church I don't?
Mm.
And I would suggest this, and I know this is a controversial opinion. I don't think it all has to do with what they consider the rules and regulations of the church.
Yeah.
I don't think it all has, and here's why. I'm all over the place, so then I'll stop and I'll let you ask another question. But here's why. In a book called Faith for Exiles, I'm forgetting the name of the author right now. He said this when he polled Gen Z, millennials, the younger generation. They actually, one of their biggest complaints against the church is that we don't ask enough of them. And
Wow.
he actually said this in a culture that actually demands a lot out of young people in school, in work, in all of these different things, family. The church asks the least of them, and that is a contradiction they can't seem to reconcile.
Wow.
You're saying Jesus is everything. You're saying he deserves everything, all of my life, all of this. And yet when I come to the church, you don't ask anything of me.
Wow.
And what I see is this growing disparity of we've tried to make it easier and easier for them, trying to get them to come in. Like whatever we've got to do. Let's not talk about homosexuality from the pulpit because we don't want to offend anybody. Let's not demand that they actually read the Bible, God forbid, you know. Let's not put their feet to the fire and say, no, you need to be evangelizing. You actually, if this is real, you should be going out and sharing the gospel with people. So we have lowered the bar so much in the church that the culture is actually going, there's no way this is real.
Wow.
Because if it was, you
Right.
would demand something of me, which ironically, Jesus very much did, right?
Wow.
So
Wow.
I think that's the incongruencies we need to start working with in the church.